The gospel passage for this week is from the book of Matthew, chapter 24, verses 36 through 44. But about that day and hour, no one knows, neither the angels of heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. For as the days of Noah were, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing until the flood came and swept them all away. So too will be the coming of the Son of Man. Then two will be in the field, one will be taken and one will be left. Two women will be grinding meal together, one will be taken and one will be left. Keep awake, therefore, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and would not let his house be broken into. Therefore, you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an unexpected hour. The word Advent comes from the Latin word adventus, which means coming or arrival. And we're beginning this year's Advent season in the same way that we do every year. Not with a teaching about Jesus's first Advent or his first arrival, his birth. Instead, each year, Advent begins with Jesus's teaching about his second Advent or his return. And trust me, I know this is awkward. It feels awkward, can even feel inappropriate sometimes, but that might be the intention. The season of Advent into Christmas, I'm sure it evokes different feelings and images and memories for each one of us. You might think of certain hymns or Christmas songs that your family would sing. We think of Christmas trees and lights and warm living rooms. Something about this season, for whatever reason, feels inherently nostalgic or backwards looking. But this passage from Matthew, it reminds us that this story of the waiting and the expectation, it is not just a nice, even miraculous story that is safely in the past, where we can look back on it, think about it, retell it from a safe and comfortable distance. This passage reminds us quite aggressively that we, just as much as anyone at any time, that we are in this story right now. We're part of it, we are characters in it, because if we're serious about it, we are waiting. And there are real stakes involved. We're probably not waiting in the same way that Matthew's original audience was waiting. We know that many, many people have lived and died waiting for the very same thing, for Jesus's second advent. But we are still waiting and looking ahead with the expectation that something entirely new and earth-shattering is going to happen. So this passage has the power to shake us out of complacency and to shake us awake. And the passage is part of Matthew's, what's often called Matthew's little apocalypse. And Jesus is drawing here from different strands of Jewish tradition and prophecy. The day of the Lord, when God will finally bring justice and righteousness to the earth. And also the tradition of the Son of Man, or the human being, which comes from the book of Daniel, where one like a son of man, or one like a human being who has been given authority by God, will come to the earth to finally set all things right. And so as Jesus is preparing to leave this life, he says, stay awake. Because the angels don't know, even he doesn't know when this second advent is going to happen. Only God knows. So he says, stay awake. And he uses some disturbing metaphors and images to make this point. He references Noah and the flood, and that up until the very moment when the rain started to fall, people were eating and drinking, getting married, doing all of the normal things that we do in life. And all of a sudden, everything was swept away. And Jesus says, just like that, his second advent will happen. He says 2 people will be in the field, going about their normal work. 1 will disappear. 1 will be left. 2 women will be grinding meal. 1 will be taken. 1 will be left. Again, in the middle of everyday, boring life, something reality changing will happen. And then, even more ominously, Jesus seems to compare himself to a thief. If the owner of the home knew when the thief was coming, they would have stayed awake. And these metaphors sound kind of menacing. I remember hearing them as a kid and being scared by them, because how could you possibly stay awake all the time? But like I said before, we don't necessarily hear Jesus's words now, like Matthew's original hearers did, or like Jesus's audience did, because we know that every single person who has existed since then has lived and died without seeing the Son of Man appearing in the clouds. I think most of us probably expect to live out our lives without this happening. But the passage is still affecting. It is still bracing. And that's because it reminds us, it confronts us, that this is where things are headed. The world as we know it will not be forever. And this is what apocalyptic imagery conveys. So right before today's passage, Jesus says, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Things that seem completely immovable, that seem eternal, seem reliable, like day and night, these things will even be shaken. The psalmist says, the mountains melt like wax in the presence of the Lord. Or, as John in Revelation puts it, there will be a new heaven and a new earth. And this is kind of paradoxically like a frightening relief. It means an end to the cruelty and injustice and hard-heartedness that we see day after day. Judgment means correcting, setting things right, and that is good news. But we also know that these things are part of us. These things are in us too. And that any apocalypse that's going to come is going to sweep through us as well. And all of this is just below the surface of our normal everyday lives. Busy, distracted lives. And it is so easy to forget. And I think it is completely natural to forget, or to just not think about the end or where things are going. In a sense, to forget that we are living in God's world and that we, our very selves, we are God's creation, and that God has revealed the arc of creation, where this is going. So Jesus says, stay awake. Remember your life's purpose. Remember the story that you are in. I don't think it's that we should be looking up at the sky all the time, waiting for the Son of Man. I don't think Jesus is saying, when the time comes, you better be behaving. One commentator that I read this week says, Jesus's words here are not advice for crisis moments. Instead, they are a call to perpetual normative readiness, regardless of circumstance. Watchfulness or wakefulness is here not a defensive or preventive posture. It is heightened attentiveness, attuned to the signs of God's presence and power. So to be awake means to be attentive to God's Spirit, aware and attentive to the story that we are in, attentive to our purpose above all other things. In our culture, which honestly might be the most individualistic in the world, we often think of our life's purpose as an individual endeavor. And it's true that each of us is called to a different expression of the big purpose, but the purpose is the same. We are part of God's people. And of course, each and every person is God's person, right? Every single person is created in God's image. But being God's people is different than that. Being a member of God's people is a choice that we make, right? It is a decision. We choose to live awake to this story. That is the story of God's creation of the world, God's calling of a particular group of people to reveal God's self. And then not just to call a particular people or a particular bloodline, but the God who formed mountains and oceans, set the sun and moon in the heavens, and who can pluck them out and extinguish them. That God came here as one of us and entered the story just like we are in the story, and revealed God's power and character through his own death and then resurrection. And then he sent his Spirit to his followers and made them his body in the world and said, follow me and follow my example and invite others into this story and into this people and proclaim the good news. So often, I think we lose sense of the forest, staring at the trees. We get distracted. We forget who we are, who our people are, and what our story is. We drift off. And I think it is a truth that we cannot stay awake as individuals. We don't stay awake if we're not even aware of our sleepiness. And so we come here to nudge or maybe shake each other awake, to remind each other what our story is, what our purpose and calling is as God's people. And so in this season, I pray that we may be attentive to God's Spirit and to the Spirit of Jesus, and that we keep waking up. So we're going to take a couple of moments here of reflection, and I'd encourage you to ponder this question. How would you assess your wakefulness right now? And maybe what are some of the things that are lulling you into sleep or drowsiness?